What is up, everyone? Dan the Card Man back again. Welcome to another weekly news video. Now, today's video is going to be chock-a-block full of things to talk through. We're going to talk through the Sports Card Radio KABOOM investigation. I'm going to share my thoughts on that and highlight a few things that I said a number of weeks ago that so many haters came at me for, so stay tuned for that. We'll then talk through this PSA Group submitter debacle from the UK. It's much worse than what essentially happened out of Marx Cards, albeit very, very similar. We'll then talk to a couple of situations, or a couple of listings actually, on eBay that Wax Museum podcast flagged that I saw on Twitter that I think you should all be aware of, because they're another example of people trying to deceive you with their listings. And I'm going to get to that in a sec, because these guys are becoming more and more elaborate. They're becoming more and more deceiving with their approach to try and do this sort of stuff. So stay tuned for what I've got to say. Now, like I said, first thing is going to be this group submitter situation out in the UK. Now, if you're not aware, Ludkin's Collectibles is a large group submitter. So they're probably the largest outside of the United States, based on what people have told me, in the sense that so many group submissions that go to PSA from an international perspective go through Ludkin's Collectibles. And that essentially means that the volume of cards that is currently stuck out at PSA is quite significant. And if you're not sure what has essentially happened, so basically people use group submitters to submit cards to PSA sometimes, right? Especially if you're international, because it works out a lot cheaper that way. Firstly, you get cheaper rates for submitting via group submitter. So typically you get like a couple $1 discount. Then also you're saving on postage, right? So instead of you having to pay, to send 5 cards to the United States and then back to get to you, right? That's a lot of money, especially from here in Australia. So you would use a group submitter to try and save some money on that, because they send cards in bulk to PSA and then that gets distributed evenly across you as a customer. Now, because of this backlog out at PSA, what's obviously happened, and the same thing with Marx Cards, is that, you as a customer, you use this group submission service, you pay up front, okay? But PSA at the time didn't require group submitters to pay the fee when they submitted. So essentially, your customers paying the group submitters, but then the group submitters not paying PSA until the cards are ready to come home. Now, for those of you that are probably pretty switched on, you're going to realize there's a big problem there, right? A pretty big red flag, in the sense that these group submitters that are essentially, not the wisest at times, because so many of them started up during the boom, they don't have the appropriate business acumen. So what they've done is, instead of saving that money that the customers have already paid them, putting them in a high interest account, essentially treating it as trade receivables, trade payables, right? They've treated that as current cash, right? Cash to be spending, liquid cash, and they've spent that money. So when the bills have come due from PSA, they're shit out of luck. They don't have the money to pay for them. And that's happened on a grand scale here, which is essentially what happened out at Marx Cards. The Marx Card situation was obviously a lot stranger as well, because it looked like, maybe they were funneling money out of the business. And I don't want to put words in people's mouths or accuse anyone of anything, but when you read their bankruptcy documents, the salaries were quite high in that instance. So it looked like they were spending more money than what they should have been. I'm not sure what's happened here. I'm not sure how they didn't have the appropriate funds to pay for these. I'm not sure if they were spending too much and they bought too much product and then got burnt when the dip happened. But that's just completely unacceptable. This is not what you expect as a customer, right? Group submitters, like if you're a group submitter out there, put your money aside, right? That stuff goes to an interest account, earn interest on it, right? And then you pay tax on the interest, obviously. But then your money's safe and secure. Don't use that money to pay for expansions in your business, to pay for new product. That's essentially the completely wrong thing to do. And you see it actually happen a lot with group breakers as well, where they're using the funds to pay for tomorrow's breaks instead of paying for the breaks they currently have, right? It's just shocking behavior, and it's not surprising, right? And this goes to what I say all the time to you. Make sure that you're very careful where you're sending your money. And I know Ludkin's was the biggest, or one of the biggest, like I said, so they had a pretty big reputation. But listen, if you can afford to send cards to PSA, okay, especially at the prices that they have been in recent times, send them in yourself. Just wear the additional $30, $40 postage cost. And I know that probably eats some of the profit in some of the cards you're trying to make a flip on. But what's better, right? Making that smaller profit or losing your cards entirely. You can't trust anyone in this business, in life in general, right? Unless you know the people face to face, that sort of stuff. Unless you know the store. Just be very careful where you're setting your money, because there's scumbags out there like this. They're going to manipulate your money. They're going to take advantage of you as a customer to line their own pockets. It's not good enough, and we're going to see more and more of it. PSA need to do a lot better when it comes to vetting this kind of process. And I know now they require payment up front, but there's a lot more they can do, because I'm sure there's many more instances of this that's happened that we don't know about. It's completely unacceptable, and we need to see less of this. So, if you're aware of anything else like this, please let me know, and I'll flag it in a new video. The next thing I want to flag is another problem with eBay's Authentication Program. So this listing was flagged to me via Wax Museum podcast. He posted it on Twitter. We had a quick chat on it, and the reason I want to highlight it to you is because eBay's Authentication Program has a pretty big loophole, like I flagged, in recent weeks. And that loophole is that it doesn't work for lots. And that's somewhat understandable because it is quite hard for you to try and authenticate that process, right? How is eBay going to authenticate a lot of 100 cards, right? It's not viable from a price point perspective. However, what you see in instances like this is that you've got somebody that is very clearly trying to sell high-end cards that are fakes. And what they do is they put them in lots with a bunch of genuine base cards to try and make the listing look genuine, to try and trick you as a buyer, right? And they're benefited in two ways, because if people fall for this and they see that top Stephen Curry rookie that turns out to be fake, there's a few other things in here. I think there's a mantle somewhere in there. That mantle is obviously fake as well. So and this mantle over here, sorry, I should say the one on the right. Like if somebody's silly enough to fall for that and this price does get pushed up to where you expect it to be, right? Because you've got a Mickey Mantle card, you've got a Stephen Curry rookie, you've got a few other cool inserts here and there. That price gets pushed up to what the eBay Authentication Program would have been, because a lot doesn't go through that, and then you're screwed. And what these guys have also done with this Stephen Curry and some of these mantles is you can see that like the shadows, the placement is on the high-end cards, right? And it's just a really shit thing to do, and it's just something you need to be aware of when you're surfing eBay. If you see lots, and you know me, like I love purchasing lots, as I've explained many times on the channel in the past, right? I love buying lots. So something like this would be interesting to me, right? But there are people out there now that are trying to capitalize on that. They're putting a bunch of fake cards that are high-end cards in these lots, putting genuine cards in there to try and trick you as a buyer. All in all, they know they'll get protected when the authentication program, doesn't get passed on to this, because it's a lot, right? Or they'll try and protect themselves when they do try and refund you or something along those lines. It's just a very dodgy thing, and you need to be across this sort of stuff because this is becoming so prevalent. You're seeing it all the time. You'll see what people will do is they'll list like a Stephen Curry rookie, and they'll just list like a $1 hoops card, and they'll put it in the listing. And when you see that, that's a huge red flag, because they should be listing the Curry by itself. If they're not listing the Curry by itself, that's all you need to know. That's a huge red flag, and it should speak for itself. Now, speaking of Curry, we've also got something else that was flagged by Wax Museum Podcast, and turns out it's actually a mistake by PSA. This Stephen Curry rookie, it is out of 149, if I remember correctly. Yes, 33 out of 149. The patch has been swapped, yet it's been graded by PSA. So this is actually a pretty interesting situation. The listing has since been taken down off eBay because Marx Museum Podcast Kyle reached out to the seller and said, listen, I think this patch has been swapped because Select, or Panini I should say, never put logos on 149 cards. Out of 149 cards, it's completely unheard of. It's not going to happen, right? So he raised the question. He thinks that the patch was swapped, I should say, before it was graded, and PSA just missed it, which is, again, really laughable from a PSA perspective, because these are the kinds of things they should be getting right? And these are the kinds of things that they should be getting right, is what I'm meant to say. It's just not good enough, right? It's a basic error. Somebody that knows cards would see a patch like this in a card out of that number and maybe ask the question. And this goes back to what I've said in the past as well, that these graders should be doing. These graders really need to have some sort of database on hand. They need to work with these manufacturers to try and get a database going of what an example looks like of each card in that set. And I know that might be a bit cumbersome to set up, but can you imagine how much easier that would be to do a review process as a grader, right? You see this Stephen Curry come in, okay, and you see, okay, what does a genuine one look like? You quickly go into the Panini database, you look at Select 2014, okay, what does a Stephen Curry Sparks look like out of 149? Oh, you'll see they've all got blue patches, or the one example that they have has a plain patch. You might ask the question, okay, why does this one look like this? Let me quickly check what the out of 100 looks like. Let me quickly check what the out of 10 looks like. Hang on a minute, those patches look worse than this one. Why is this one in a 149? That would then, start triggering the questions. And in my opinion, that's how they should be approaching their review process, at least the very start of it, because that would then allow them to say, okay, I've got some questions that this patch might be swapped. I can't see anything on the card. Maybe we need to get somebody else in to look at the card in a little bit more detail. Or maybe I'll start to try and focus a little bit more than what I would have. And you as a customer, right, me as a collector as well, you would sit there and expect them to do detailed checks in the first place. But, most of the time it's entry-level people processing this sort of stuff. They're not trained. They're getting pushed and pressured to pump as many cards out as possible. So they're just quickly trying to rush through things. And that's not good enough, and it's not okay in any way, shape, or form. But you can understand why something like this might have got missed in the era that we're currently in, where these graders are just pumping out cards. That would have been a good step for them to try and start this process and start asking questions. They need things like that. It's just shocking to me, and it's not overly surprising, but it's good to see that the seller has taken the listing down, and hopefully they can try and get a refund if they did buy it from PSA, because this is a huge error on PSA's part, and this is what PSA's guarantees for, right? When they've graded something that they shouldn't have, you deserve your money back as a customer. What might happen, as it's happened recently, where they've had some patch swap cards and it's gone back to PSA have said, we can't prove that it was patch swapped. So, say with that what you will, take that as you want it. This is unfortunate because people won't buy these cards. So this collector is probably shit out of luck. Somebody might buy it, but the people that are switched on to the process and understand what patches look like, especially out of 149 cards, are going to avoid this like the plague because it's very clearly been patch swapped. So keep an eye out for that. Basically when you're surfing eBay is what I want to say. Now, the thing you're probably all waiting for, my thoughts on this sports card radio situation regarding the Crown Royale kabooms. Now, if you're not aware, basketball Crown Royale 2022, 2021, people have worked out that by looking at the serial number on the front of the box, they know which boxes contain the kaboom case hit. Now, the way this came to light was that customers went on to LMS box breaks, as you can see on screen now in Sports Card Radio's video. They say, can you please show me every single box, specifically the hologram sticker? Show me every sticker. You know what? That's the box I want. Please open that up on camera. It has the kaboom, surprise, surprise. Now, LMS breaks were obviously a bit intrigued by this because that's a weird request to get from a customer. They went and tested this theory themselves and worked out, you know what? This does work. And the first thing they did was, rather than try and line their own pockets, they went to Sports Card Radio and said, you guys need to do something about this because this is disgusting. It is shocking. Now, some of you might say, well, why is it those things? Well, if you've got customers, okay, that are aware of this and they're jumping onto streams to try and buy these boxes, you've probably also got breakers out there that are aware of this, right? And what those breakers are probably doing is ripping off their customers, right? People are very deceptive, trying to take advantage of you. It's fraud at the end of the day, and there's probably things like that occurring. So the fact that these guys went and rushed to Sports Card Radio speaks to them being incredibly trustworthy and good dudes, in my opinion. Now, some of you might say, well, this is just one instance. Does it actually work? Well, you've got Sports Card Radio that have confirmed it. You've got LMS box breaks that have confirmed it. You've also since had people say, you know what, I saw the same thing on a Whatnot stream. I know it does work. You've also got people saying, you know what, we saw this on Discord a couple of weeks ago. It does work, right? So you've got all these people corroborating this information now as well. And the timing of this is a little bit funny, to be honest, because it goes to some of the things we've said in recent weeks, right, with regards to the whole backyard break situation. And so many people were quick to say it's impossible for Panini to try and track this information, right? They've got no idea what they're doing. And my logic was, okay, is this sort of stuff improbable? Maybe. But you can't say that Panini doesn't know this sort of stuff is happening. Like my video from a couple of weeks ago that I'll put up on screen now, where you had the impeccable WWE where there was a placeholder 1 of 1 in that card. And I said in that video, the fact that there's a placeholder 1 of 1 in that box, right? And they knew they had to replace it, that indicates in some capacity that Panini are aware of where certain hits are. Then we had a few other people come out and say, you know what, the manufacturing process is machine driven, it's very automated, it's hard to actually figure that out. And my logic was, as Firehand Cards did explain in his video with regards to how things are packed, the way he explained and what the videos do show from Panini is that you've got all these runs, right? You've got all these like big trays that drop cards into packs. And the way it works is you've got trays of base cards, SPs, SSPs, numbered cards, inserts, 1 of 1s, so on and so forth, right? And each of those trays drops a card in a pack in a certain rate, right? So some trays, like the base cards, will probably get 5 every time, but then the hits will probably be 1 every 10 packs or 1 every 100 packs, as an example, okay? And he said, because of that, you're not going to know where things go. And my logic was, well, if you've got somebody out at Panini that is determined which boxes and which packs should contain those hits, right? They know when 1 of 1 should be dropping in. The logic is, okay, if you know how many packs and boxes that machine produces on an hourly basis, okay, as I did say in that video, they know when they're dropping in, right? So they know that when they're going to drop in is every 100 packs. And they know how many packs are in every single box. And they know how many boxes are in every single case. You know where that box and pack that contains that 1 of 1 might be somewhere in the stream, right? You can do the math to work out, okay, if this is the first box that we've produced, it's probably the 3rd or 4th box down the line that's going to contain it, right? And it's a bit idiotic to think otherwise, in my opinion. But this news with regards to the serial number has gone one step further, because obviously Panini want to make sure that, for the same reason they're pushing cards into packs at a certain rate, they want to make sure that certain boxes go into certain cases at a certain rate, right? Because let's say those packs are produced and then the boxes are wrapped and sealed and then they go somewhere else and then they go into a case, right? It's not done in one end-to-end process. They need to make sure that there's not going to be a case out there that contains 4 1 of 1s, as an example. Like, that could occur based on random distribution, but they don't want that to happen all the time, right? So the same logic for them distributing hits into packs goes into them distributing boxes with hits in them into certain cases, okay? And that's what these serial numbers are doing. And it goes to some of the things I spoke about in my last 2 videos, where I told you that I've had people tell me there are breakers out there saying yes or no to cases of flawless and NT based off the serial number on the box. Now, I can't corroborate this myself, but maybe there's some confusion there from my sources. Maybe these sources are saying, you know what, they're doing the same thing with regards to the serials on those boxes like we're seeing from Crown Royale here. It's not shocking to me. It's not surprising to me in any way, shape, or form. This stuff is entirely plausible. Whether it's somebody that figured this out for themselves, or it's somebody from Panini or the manufacturer that has indicated this, sequence to people out in the wild, is irrelevant in my opinion. It can happen. It's ignorant to think that it cannot happen. Now, this is the proof that it can happen. It's just silly to think that Panini don't have the fortitude or the business acumen to try and make sure that packs are being packed correctly, hits are going into the right packs, hits are going out into boxes evenly, and into cases from a distribution perspective. It's going out in an even distribution, right? And there's not things that are happening where you're getting skewed boxes with all the hits, as an example, right? That sort of stuff would not fly for them as a business. It's their main thing as a business. Outside of their QC, their main thing is to make sure that things are distributed evenly. It's ignorant to think that that stuff cannot happen. They cannot track this sort of stuff. This is, I'm sure, a domino in this process, right? This is a huge can of worms. I'd be very curious to see how this information got out. I really hope that there aren't breakers out there that have deceived customers with this information, i.e. keeping those boxes with kabooms aside to try and maximize profits, to try and sell their customers dud product. Given what we've seen with regards to certain breakers in recent weeks, this is not overly out of the realm of possibility is what I want to try and say. There's a lot more to talk through on this, so I'll probably highlight that in a video next week. There's a lot of things I want to talk about, specifically why something like this could be perceived as fraud. Like, we could have the respective consumer authorities from respective countries jumping in on this, because if this information did come from a manufacturer, okay, or somebody within that process that did indicate this is fraud, okay? And those kinds of institutions look after that sort of stuff. They look into that sort of stuff. Depending on how it sort of happens, if you've got breakers out there that are, intentionally deceiving customers, that is fraud. And I don't care what you say, right? You might say it's just a card. I don't care. It's fraud. If you've got people out there that are intentionally trying to deceive people because they know which boxes contain the hits, and they're holding those hits back, or they're pocketing those hits for themselves, and they're selling you as a customer in the hope that you got a chance to try and get a card, and you as a customer don't realize that you're not even in the game in the first place, is completely unacceptable. That stuff is fraud. I'm going to share my thoughts on that in a video next week. I hope you did like it. I know I did rant. This is a very, very long video. I do apologize. So please let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments below, as well as the things we've already discussed earlier today. I'm mumbling like crazy today. I've had a long day in the sun. I was at a card show earlier today here in Sydney. It was fantastic. There's a video coming on that next week. But then I went and did some hard yakka in the yard, mowed the lawn, did some gardening in the sun. Brutal today. I'm very, very tired. I hope you liked the video. Please share your thoughts, like I said a bit earlier, on anything we discussed today or anything else you think I should be made aware of. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.